Hello everyone, and welcome to the Future of Dogs podcast, a place for the whole dog world to come together and ask the big why and what if questions that will shape the dogs of the future. Join me, Hannah Malloy, as we chat to some of the world's most groundbreaking professionals intent on enriching and evolving the future of dogs. This podcast is in association with Animal Behaviour, my online video learning library for dog owners and dog geeks. Big thanks to my dog's favourite food and our Season 1 sponsor, Nature's Menu. With over 40 years in the pet food business, Nature's Menu is Europe's leading expert in raw and natural pet food. So let's jump into the conversation. Welcome to part 2 of the Future of Dog Grooming. We're talking to Sue Williamson, who is a low-stress handling groomer and is the queen, as far as I'm concerned, the dog Yoda of restraint-free and low-stress handling in grooming. So Sue, last time we finished off, we were talking about trigger stacking and how we can reduce trigger stacking in dogs and just keep them on a sort of a gentle ebb, able to communicate and ask us to start and stop the grooming process. And you were talking to us a little bit about where you started. And I'd just love to kind of get an overview from you, Sue. If you could answer this question for me, what's your what if? So what if is it that stimulates you to want to change the world in the world of dog grooming? What could the world look like if everybody was practicing the techniques that you use every day, do you think?
Oh, it would just make life so much easier for the dogs, the guardians and the groomers. Consent-based grooming is so easy. It's so relaxing. I've had, I sit in my salon sometimes grooming dogs and I'm thinking this is like almost like living in fairyland. It's nice and calm. The dogs are cooperating. The dogs aren't stressed. I'm not stressed. If I could replicate that across the world, that would be perfect. Getting guardians to accept that the dogs have got emotions. They feel fear the same as we do. And, really think about what's best for my dog. Does it need to look like it's going in a show ring tomorrow, or does it just need to look fit for purpose? Does it just need to have a fairly short trim, once every 6 weeks and just keep on top of that? Or does it really need 3 or 4 inches of fur on its body that it absolutely hates being brushed, hates being groomed? And then the groomers as well, not wanting that perfect groom themselves. I mean, when we're training to be groomers, we talked about balance and angulation. Most guardians don't even know what angulation is. I'm not sure I do anymore, to be quite honest. So it's about if I could get people to think what's best for the actual dog. The dog actually doesn't care what it looks like. And to be quite honest, I could, as I say, I've got a dog in later this evening. I'll groom him today. He'll go for a walk in the fields tomorrow. He'll come back with brambles. He'll come back with mud on his fur. So even if I get him perfect this evening, by tomorrow dinner time, he's going to look a scruff bag again. That's just the way of dogs. And I would much rather a dog be a dog and go in fields and enjoy itself than have to be on a lead all the time and pavement walking just so this perfect haircut lasts a bit longer. So in my what if, it's if I could get everybody to consider that a lot of dogs find grooming emotionally stressful, so stressful. So just do whatever is easiest for your dog. If that's keeping the fur short so you don't have to brush it on a daily basis. The groomer's not thinking they've got to have that perfect finish, because a lot of guardians actually are not bothered about a perfect finish. They just want an easily maintained coat. But if just everybody remembered that dogs have got emotions, let's make their life easier, and then our life becomes easier too.
And that's just so amazing, Sue. I think you've touched on a really interesting point there, that some people I've always said there's three different kinds of grooms. There's like a welfare groom, aka this person hasn't taken their dog to the groomer for 6 to 8 months, maybe a year, and actually the dog is really matted. I know there's a lot of groomers whose hearts are breaking right now for the cockapoo world, and just, God never made that fur for a reason. It just mats. It takes a lot of work to maintain. And so you've got the welfare grooms, and then you've got the sort of maintenance grooms. And then you've got the sort of show grooming world, the sort of competitive grooming world. And so what I'm hearing you say is that this is more so for the pet dog owners maintenance groom, and that they're easy techniques that people can continue to practice that will just really improve the lives of dogs. I wonder, do you think there's any room if you were, say, a competitive groomer and yet you wanted to be a really good competitive groomer, but you also wanted to, mishmash and understand the dog's perspective and incorporate these techniques too? How might they start to do that? And is there any technique that you no longer use that you were trained to do? What would you just throw out and say, like, that's just hideous, we don't need to do that to dogs ever, in your experience as a groomer?
This chin holds where they hold the fur of the dog to hold the head still, and holding onto the legs. I really wish they weren't taught anymore, because they're actually not needed. If we take a more consent-based approach, we wouldn't need those at all. I've got a fantastic groomer near me. She does a lot of competitive grooming, but she uses a lot of model dogs. These, you get like a plastic dog and you put the fur over it, and she does some amazing work with that. But also she competes with dogs as well. But she always makes sure the dogs she competes with are happy to be groomed, that they're relaxed being groomed. She wouldn't take a dog that was anxious about grooming into a competition, or even style it at home in her salon. So there are things you can do. If you've got a dog that's really relaxed about being groomed, then go for it. Do it in a nice show groom, nice Asian fusion. But if you've got a dog that really can't cope with the grooming process, then it's unfair on everybody involved to force it into having this perfect cut, because the dog will be really stressed, the groomer will be really stressed, and really then the only person that's happy is the guardian, because they've got what they want. But have they really got what they want? Because their dog was going to come home stressed and probably a bit narky, and maybe not eat for a couple of days after a groom, because that happens. So yeah, for dogs that are used for competition, it really needs to be the right dog, in my opinion. Personally, competing's not for me. I tried one when I first qualified. There was a mock competition that my trainer was organising, so I went, and I actually took my miniature poodle with me. She was 6 months at the time, and she was brilliant being groomed. I'd introduced everything positively to her, but we actually got into the competition room, and she just couldn't cope. She didn't want to be brushed. She didn't want to be clipped. All she wanted to do was sit on my knee. So I actually just pulled a chair up and sat on my knee for the whole time. Picked myself later, because what I'd actually done was packed away and took her home. But I was in a position at that time, I was a bit naive. It was before I'd done my dog behaviour training and some of the other low stress things. So I was at fault then, because I didn't know any different. But yeah, I was really shocked how different she was in my salon, in a nice relaxed place where she knows what's going to happen, to being in a room surrounded by other dogs as well. And it was just so stressful for her that I decided that actually I'm not going to finish the groom. And I just sat with her on my knee, and she was quite happy there. Thank you very much. And that's what she wanted. Yeah. So the two can go together, because if you've got a dog that's relaxed about being groomed, it's not going to fight you anyway. It's just going to let you do whatever you need to do. And if you try and compete with a dog that doesn't enjoy grooming, you're going to know about it. It's going to make your life impossible to groom that dog. So the dogs will actually let you know they've got a really leveling way about them. It doesn't matter how good a groomer you think you are. If that dog is not enjoying it, it's going to let you know.
And we want them to look confident, don't we? Behaviourally, in every way. If they've had a bad time, much like with the show dogs, I'd love to show the show ring. So much happens in ringcraft that is sort of quite heavy-handed, really. Some dogs get their tails sort of wired up, which blows my mind a lot. And there's so much you can do to teach a dog to stand confidently. It's just a pose, just like you would teach a dog to do a sit or a down or whatever else. You can teach a dog using rewards to want to pose that way, and I think that's just super important. If what you want to do is win a show, is that the dog looks comfortable and looks confident, then they'll wear their coat better, won't they? That's the best way of looking at it, like a little model. And does it take longer? So if I was going to say, right, I'm going to throw, I've got a really big salon, I've got quite a lot of clients. Do you know what? You've really opened my eyes, Sue, to the need for this in my own business, but I need to understand how some of this business modeling works. Like, if I was to do this kind of grooming, how long would it take compared to what I am experienced of understanding as a groom, would you say? And what do you think I should charge as a groomer if I'm going to do this that differently?
Okay, so once you've identified, because the stuff that takes the time is identifying what the dog doesn't like and finding a better way or a more manageable way for that dog. That's what takes the time. Those sessions, you only need to do 15, 20 minutes. You just charge your hourly rate pro rata for those. Once you've identified those and you've found a way to be able to groom that dog, there's no reason why it shouldn't take you any less time than it would, how we've always, if you can groom a cockapoo an hour and a half, there's no reason why you can't groom a cockapoo an hour and a half using consent-based techniques, because you're taking all the stress out of it. That time when the dog's doing this, you're holding onto a leg and you spend 5 minutes doing this, you're getting rid of all that. You're getting rid of the dogs dancing on the table because they don't want you to touch the feet. You're getting rid of all that poo and wee because the dog's stressed. There's nothing more frustrating than doing a beautiful groom on a dog and then it pooing because it's been so stressed throughout the groom and you have to start again. You're reducing your risk to be bitten by, God knows how much. I've been grooming for 6 years. I've had 5 minor bites, not even needing a doctor's appointment, not even really breaking the skin. And I can say, hand on heart, every one of those bites has been my fault where I've missed something. So just pay more attention to the dog's body language, paying attention to what they can cope with and what they can't cope with, and adapting around that rather than having that mindset that this has got to be done. The dog needs grooming, it's the client's paid for the groom, it's got to be done. It's that mindset, the client expects perfection. Perhaps the client doesn't expect perfection. So talk to your clients, find what they really want. What is their priority? Is it having their dog comfortable being groomed, or is it having that perfect trim, whatever? If they want that perfect trim, whatever, then consent grooming may not be ideal. But I'm not saying, I do a damn good pet groom. I can't do a show groom, but I can do a damn good pet groom. And the dogs will let me do that. So I don't battle with any dogs. I'm not fighting with a fully grown Russian Terrier, because I'm not going to win that battle. And I apply exactly the same rules to a little Shih Tzu. Shih Tzus can be pretty fiery when they want to be. So taking out all that anger and that fear just makes it less stressful. Finding out, I've got a little Shih Tzu that comes to me. He's got quite a fiery temper. He's really anxious about grooming. He gets regular ear infections, so pain, and memory of pain as well. So he might not be in pain, but because he's really sensitive around his ears, because he's had so many ear infections. So I've just worked out with him. He's not over keen on the bath. So what I do with him, I clip him off first. Then it's a quick wipe over bath rather than a full blown bath and then a full blown dry and then clip him off. He copes so much better the other way around. So I can do him in 40 minutes. I would challenge any groomer to groom that dog in less than 40 minutes using traditional techniques without losing the hand. It's the time it takes is finding out the best way to groom that dog, and once you've cracked that, it's plain sailing.
That's so amazing, Sue. What you've just said is that it takes the same amount of time, which I think, to be honest with you, is not what any of us were expecting to hear. I think a lot of people think, well, that's just going to take ages. And I guess, you're coming from the perspective of a groomer that grooms a lot of, I'm using inverted commas here now, difficult dogs, dogs who've had a bad previous experience, and as you say, are stacked or have memories of pain or memories of trauma with a particular technique or piece of equipment. I wonder, how would you problem solve? So if you've got a dog who has just gone, no, absolutely not, you're not allowed to do that, that really hurts. So say maybe they've got a grass seed between their toes, and obviously you need to be able to get that out because that's causing them some genuine pain and discomfort. Like, would there ever be a point that you might use restraints? Should there be, a pain condition that you need to manage, and that for all the waiting in the world, that dog's not going to come back over because it hurts? Like, when would that come into play for you?
Yeah, and that's the only time I would use more force. Is when the physical health is at risk. So claws growing into paw pads, as you say, grass seeds, brambles in ears that will cause excessive matting. And I've used a muzzle on one dog that his front right leg was that matted he couldn't move it because it was stuck to his chest. So he'd got no movement, hardly any movement in his right legs because the matting was just that bad. And I did use a muzzle just to relieve that matting, and that was it. The dog went home after that. I refused to groom anymore. I think I've used a muzzle about 5 times in 6 years, and every case has been a welfare issue. That there's been a couple where the dew claws have grown into the pads. The one I had to use where he was matted under his arm and it had stuck to him. And I think the others both actually, the one was a dog that had got really long nails. His nails were about that long. How does that happen? So they definitely got to be cut. But once I've used a muzzle, in those cases, that's the groom stops after that, and then they come back in and start from scratch the next time. Ideally, I'd want the dog to be muzzle trained, so it isn't negative, but a lot of people don't muzzle train the dogs, so sometimes it's just you have to bite the bullet and do it, but then the groomer finishes after that. You just get rid of the immediately pressing health issue and then start from scratch the next groom. And I'd probably do a free work session before I would groom again, just so that the dog can start to decompress in the salon and get to know me again in better circumstances. But yeah, my default, I don't like muzzles, because I think as well, once you start using muzzles, you stop looking at behaviour because you don't have to worry about the dog biting you because you got the muzzle on. So you stop paying attention to the body language. So it's just not, in fact, I don't even know where my muzzles are at the moment.
Such a good point, isn't it? I say the same with pet dog owners and leads. Actually, the second that you put a lead on, your brain switches off talking to the dog, and they're just suddenly like, well, I can move you from A to B now. I've got a cord attached to you, easy peasy. So yeah, I totally get that with muzzles, and I think a lot of the techniques, we're in a very similar field. Mine is more so, I'm a dog behaviour geek. That's what I do for a living. And so but I really love teaching people about body language. That's always been my heart. And just letting people giving them the freedom to be able to read their dog's posture and see, little signs like, oh, he's giving me his paw, and I'm like, oh, actually that's a paw raise, so actually I think he's a bit uncomfortable. Suddenly people's eyes open, and it just expands the world between the dog and the owner. And I think the difference between some of what you do and what I do is that I also teach a bit of active participation. So I teach the dog to do a game that he can continually get reinforced. And that can be a bit tricky for some groomers, because actually they're grooming and they're also thinking about training. So you kind of become a sort of octopus armed trainer. I know you can do that because you've had lots of experience in doing training too. So I love that actually we can step in and just begin by looking at the dog participating by stepping on the mat, and then when they want to say no thank you, that they have an out and that they can come away again. I think you've given us all some really great things to think about there, Sue. Really beautiful depth of knowledge. So I wonder if you can finish us off with just 5 tips for introducing, if you were going to work with a brand new puppy, what are the first 5 things that you would ask any groomer or any dog owner to do with their doggy?
Okay, so I'll start with the groomer because that's the easiest. When you get a puppy in for the first time, please don't even touch it. Just let that puppy wander around your salon. I use free work, but you don't have to even use free work. Just let that puppy come in, have a look around your salon, have a sniff of you. Don't be tempted to bend down and touch it. Just give them that space to absorb. It was really, I went on a course a few weeks ago and somebody said going into a new environment for some dogs is like the scene in Notting Hill where the guy walks outside in his underpants and all the photographers are there and all the flashes are going off. And it must be like that for puppies walking into a salon. There's the smells, there's the sounds, there's the different textures, the textures on the feet. The people in there, if it's a multi-grooming salon, there'll be other dogs in there that might be barking. So there's so much for them to process. So first visit to the salon, I don't even touch them unless they make it really obvious they want to be touched. And then it's minimal. It's quick stroke, hands off, and just assess their body language. And then from then on, the grooms progress. I do a little bit more each time, but only at the pace that the puppies can work with. So it might be a year until they get a full groom, because I'm working with them and the guardian to make sure that they're having a good time in the salon. When you're thinking about something like a cockapoo that's probably got 12, 13 years of being groomed, you want that 12, 13 years to be a good experience every time, not something to be terrified of. For guardians, my tips would be get your dog used to being handled. And that doesn't mean picking it up, putting it down, picking it up. That just means sitting on the floor with your dog. And when it's relaxed, playing with its ears, with its feet, stroking different parts of its body. You can also start to name different parts of his body. So you can pick the leg up and say leg, and touch the ear and tail, so that they start to recognize different parts of their body. Because then when it comes to grooming, you can say, oh, I want to brush your leg now, or I want to brush your tail. Find an appropriate groomer. So there's 4 or 5 types of groomer. You've got your one-to-one, like I am. I've got a little cabin in my garden. You've got a salon where you've got multiple groomers. You've got groomers that come to your house to groom, or you've got groomers in a van. So choose which groomer you think is going to be best for your puppy, not for you, for your puppy. Book them in as soon as the vaccinations are complete for that first session, so that they can get used to that salon, the smells and that before they have any grooming done. Don't leave it to 6-month-old and take a matted dog to a groomer. It's not good. Ask for recommendations of groomers, but again, make sure it's a groomer that follows a similar ethos to yourself. So if you want your groomer to go at a slow pace with your dog, you need to find a groomer that works that way, because if they're not set up to do that, then you risk all this work you've put in for your puppy. You risk ruining all that by a groomer that will just bath on the first occasion. Train your puppy for as much of the grooming process as possible. So I'm going to do a major plug now. If you buy my book, Introducing Your Puppy to Girlless Grooming, I've done it step by step in that, how to do things like how to introduce brushing, how to introduce having their paws held, how to introduce being put on a table. And I've broken everything down so you can do all this work before your dog needs to go to a salon. And that just makes it so much easier for the groomer as well. I think that's 5.
I think you smashed it, Sue. I think we got 6 right there.
Oh, wow.
That was buy one, get 6 free. Get one free. Buy 5, get one free. So number 1, just to summate, we had number 1, hands off the puppy when they first arrive in the grooming studio for groomers. Don't touch them, just assess their body language. Number 2, we had handle your dog. If you're the dog's guardian, make sure you're playing and touching them at home. Number 3, name the body parts. That's really novel, isn't it? Every time you touch a part of your dog's body, you're going to give that part of the dog's body a name. I love that. Number 4, make sure you find an appropriate groomer for your puppy. So not the one that's easy for us to get to or that's the cheapest, but actually the one that your dog seems to be the most comfortable hanging out with. And number 5, make sure that you get them in as soon as they've been fully vaccinated. These groomers want to get their hands on your puppies as soon as they feasibly can, not 6 months in. And number 6, train them for grooming. And you can get hold of Sue's amazing grooming book. Right now, you can jump on her website. You can get hold of her courses as well. Highly recommend jumping into her social channels. And if you are on Facebook, jumping into Taking the Guru out of grooming and joining that wonderful communicative community there. So thank you so much, Sue, for taking the time to speak to us. I will continue to follow your career. To be honest with you, from groomer trainer to groomer trainer, it's really lovely to hang out, because some people might say, well, why would you interview somebody who does a very similar thing to you? And you and I, when we discussed doing this podcast, didn't we, said, there isn't really competition. There's so much that needs to be learned by the industry. There's so many people who need to absorb this delicious information. I don't consider that there really is competition in this realm, to be honest with you. And it's just wonderful to get to chat with you.
Yeah, there's so many dogs out there. There's so many guardians, there's so many groomers. There's not enough of us, to be quite honest, that can teach the amount of people out there. So we need more we need more of us to get that message out there, to train the guardians, to train the groomers, and just get the message out there that there is a different way to groom our puppies, and grown dogs and rescue dogs in particular. They can be quite challenging, and just really day-to-day living with the dogs as well. It's even my 4-month-old working cocker, he's actually just crashed out at the side of me at the moment, because he's used to having gentle handling. He knows, although he knows the rules, I haven't gone overboard in training him, because I think dogs just learn naturally themselves when given the opportunity to learn themselves. So yeah, I think the more groomers and guardians we can have taking a more consent-based approach to grooming, the better. And if that means collaborating and talking to people that do that same work, then so much the better.
This is it. I think it's teamwork makes the dream work, as far as I'm concerned, Sue. And so for those of you that want to find out more about consent-based grooming or low-stress grooming, you can look me up as Above and Beyond Grooming on Animal Behaviour. You can look Sue up, who is absolutely astounding and has multiple books and a really huge community. And there's also another groomer called Stephanie Zilkman in the spirit of Christmas. For those of you that are going to get your Christmas puppies, all three of us stretch the country of the United Kingdom, and you can get hold of us. You can actually get hold of us all over the world because all three of us have online courses that you can jump onto. I've just jumped onto Sue's puppy course. We love learning from each other, and it is actually a really cooperative community. I've got Stephanie's I Can Be a Dog Detective book. She's got my dog body language book. Sue's got my dog body language book. So we just love hanging out with each other and talking to each other, and just promoting this lovely strategy for changing the world of grooming. So on behalf of all of our listeners, Sue, and all of the people who are going to flood to your material and just absorb it and look at grooming and hanging out with their dog in a totally different way, I just wanted to say thank you from our audience, and hopefully we'll get to hang out again not too far away and find out more about how all of the success stories from all of the amazing people that you've been training.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
That's all from us and another episode of The Future of Dogs. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe and keep up to date with everything that's happening in the future of dogs.